Veritasium. Oh yeah, I wanted to watch the Veritasium video. Does anyone have it? The why can't you have nice things video? Just play. I need to pee too, so just someone fucking send it to me, and I'll fire it off, and then I'll go pee real quick. Oh, here it is. Thank you.
This is a video about things like cars, phones, and light bulbs.
Oh, I gotta pee so bad. I'll be back.
Conspiracy that made them worse. This video was sponsored by NordVPN. More about them at the end of the video. I am outside Livermore Fire Station number 6. And in here, they have the longest continuously on light bulb in the world. It has been on for 120 years, since 1901. There it is, huh? It's not even connected to a light switch, but it does have a backup battery and generator. So the big question is, how has this light bulb lasted so long? It was manufactured by hand not long after commercial light bulbs were first invented. And yet, it has been running for over 1 million hours, way longer than any light bulb today is meant to last. A while back, a friend of mine told me this story, that someone had invented a light bulb that would last forever, years ago. But they never sold it because an everlasting light bulb makes for a terrible business model. I mean, you would never have any repeat customers, and eventually you would run out of people to sell light bulbs to. I thought this story sounded ridiculous. If you could make an everlasting light bulb, then everyone would buy your light bulb over the competitors. And so you could charge really high prices, make a lot of money, even if demand would eventually dry up. I just couldn't imagine that we had better light bulbs in the past and then intentionally made them worse. But it turns out I was wrong. At least, sort of. Inventing a viable electric light was hard. I mean, this is the typical incandescent design, which just involves passing electric current through a material, making it so hot that it glows. You know, less than 5% of the electrical energy comes out as light. The other 95% is released as heat. So these are really heat bulbs, which give off a little bit of light as a byproduct. You know, the temperature of the filament can get up to 2800 Kelvin. That is half as hot as the surface of the sun. At temperatures like those, most materials melt, and if they don't melt, they burn. Which is why in the 1840s, Warren de la Rue came up with the idea of putting the filament in a vacuum bulb, so there's no oxygen to react with. By 1879, Thomas Edison had made a bulb with a cotton thread filament that lasted 14 hours. Other inventors created bulbs with platinum filaments or other carbonized materials, and gradually the lifespan of bulbs increased. The filaments changed from carbon to tungsten, which has a very high melting point, and by the early 1920s, average bulb lifetimes were approaching 2,000 hours, with some lasting 2,500 hours. But this is when lifetimes stopped getting longer and started getting shorter. In Geneva, Switzerland, just before Christmas 1924, there was a secret meeting of top executives from the world's leading light bulb companies. Philips, International General Electric, Tokyo Electric, Osram from Germany, and the UK's Associated Electric, among others. They formed what became known as the Phoebus Cartel, named after Phoebus, the Greek god of light. There, all these companies agreed to work together to help each other by controlling the world's supply of light bulbs. In the early days of the electrical industry, there had been lots of different small light bulb manufacturers, but by now, they had largely been consolidated into these big corporations, each dominant in a particular part of the world. The biggest threat they all faced was from longer-lasting light bulbs. For example, in 1923, Osram sold 63 million light bulbs, but the following year, they sold only 28 million. Light bulbs were lasting too long, eating into sales. So all the companies in the cartel agreed to reduce the lifespan of their bulbs to 1,000 hours, cutting the existing average almost in half. But how could each company ensure that the other companies would actually follow the rules and make shorter lasting light bulbs? After all, it would be in each of their individual interests to make a better product to outsell the others. Well, to enforce the 1,000-hour limit, each of the manufacturers had to send in sample bulbs from their factories. and they were tested on big test stands like this one. If a bulb lasted significantly longer than 1,000 hours, well then the company was fined. If a bulb lasted longer than 3,000 hours, well the fine was 200 Swiss francs for every 1,000.
That's how the free market works, okay? Like, you don't understand. Like, this is how it works. This is just, capitalism breeding innovation. You see, you simple fools do not understand that if you make a better product, then, you're not gonna be able to sell a lot more of that other product that is made to break.
Bulbs sold, and there are records of these fines being issued to companies. But how do you make a worse light bulb in the first place? Well, the same engineers who had previously been tasked with extending the lifespan now had to find ways to decrease it. So they tried different materials, different shaped filaments, and thinner connections. And if you look at the data, they were successful. Ever since the formation of the cartel, the lifespan of...
Do you think the same logic applies to medicine? No, not entirely. Because there is a socialized component to medicine, but it also does apply to medicine as well. Like, capitalism making it so that, and big pharma protecting IP, making it so that, like, you don't experiment, you don't do enough R&D, or even if you do R&D, but a patent is slated to expire, you just kind of toss it out, or you hide it, and you patent guard by basically changing the delivery mechanism, for example, or like minor tweaks to the same fucking the same drug that you have for years and years to extend the patent as best as you can. Wrong. Planned obsolescence isn't real. What? Neoliberalism is great. First of all, it 100% is real. And I'm talking about, like, in big pharma, people will say that, like, the most common meme is that big pharma is not trying to cure us, but they're just basically they're not trying to cure us. They're not looking for a cure, but instead they're just looking to hook you on drugs or whatever the fuck, right? So that's not entirely true. But they will absolutely take advantage of the fact that there is just inelastic demand all the way through and through, because you'll fucking literally die if you don't have the drugs. So they'll price you at whatever the fuck they can. And America is a great example of this. The American drug market, the American drug consumers are an incredible example of this. But big pharma fucks over people in different ways, not by, like, refusing to research actual cures or some shit like that. For the most part, they don't do that. U.S. medicine is about treating, not curing. Not necessarily. The opiate crisis says otherwise. I mean, there is no cure, though, guys. There is no fucking cure to the disease of addiction. Like, they're douchebags, and they're trying to fucking do their best to continue having you hooked on other fucking drugs and shit, but it's not like there's a fucking cure for it, you know what I mean? And they're, like, simply hiding it. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, a lot of diseases are super complicated to treat, you know what I mean? So that's why I'm very careful with the way I'm talking about big pharma, in the sense that, like, there isn't like a AIDS vaccine or some shit, and there isn't like a cure for HIV, and they're hiding it so they fucking get you hooked on, like, this incredibly expensive drugs instead. Like, there isn't like a cancer cure that they're hiding. That's like what QAnon people think, you know what I mean? There actually is a cure for pain. It's called magnets. What? What the fuck? Anyway, the overwhelming majority of the public has no idea how fucking complicated this stuff is. Yeah, I don't know. I don't like when people just rush to that. Like, Big Pharma is pretty fucking evil, okay? Probably some of the most evil people on the planet. Having said that, though, like, people assuming that there's like a cure for fucking cancer and they're not like they're just hiding it, and that shit's dumb as fuck.
Light bulbs steadily decreased, so that by 1934 the average lifespan was just 1,205 hours. And just as they had planned, sales increased for cartel members by 25% in the 4 years after.
Fuck, last point. Especially because you have to remember that there is a lot of socialized components within the innovation structure. So it's still fucking publicly funded research that is looking for answers to the problems that we have. It's not fucking Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson doing R&D. They're not the only ones doing R&D. Most of the R&D is still coming from publicly funded research and NIH grants and universities. So they're not going to stop like the fucking cure to cancer if they could find it. Anyway. But the greatest example I will give you as far as like modern medicine and it being dog shit is physical therapy versus focusing on just not feeling pain, right? Pain avoidance versus like actually trying to treat your physical issues. Physical therapy is actually curing the problems that you have. Medication, on the other hand, basically is just avoiding the pain. So you're not literally fucking you're not actually healing yourself. You're just basically avoiding the pain. And I'm not saying like pain management is really important and it can be debilitating, right? So I totally understand that. But you ultimately should still seek to eliminate the root cause of the problem. And that is, numbing the pain is not doing that. I don't think avoiding is the right word. I mean, what would it be considered? There's a different word for it that I can't think of right now. Physical therapy be chiropractic? No, I'm not talking about chiropractors. I'm talking about fucking physical therapists. No, I think avoidance is suppressing the pain, I guess, or masking the pain. That's what it is. You're mitigating the pain. When you take a painkiller, you're fucking stopping the nerve endings from feeling the pain, right? But the reason why you have pain to begin with is because it's your body telling you that you have a fucking problem. And if you just keep mitigating the symptoms, you're basically just avoiding the problem that you have, which is precisely why physical therapy is what should be focused on when it comes to all of the issues that you have with your body. I'm not talking about fucking chiropractors. I'm sorry.
1926. And even though the cost of components came down,
yes, there are things like nerve damage. I'm not talking about that
unchanged, so they increased their profit margins. So did people know that the light bulb companies were conspiring together to make their products worse? No. The Phoebus Cartel claimed that its purpose was to increase standardization and efficiency of light bulbs. I mean, they did establish this screw thread as standard. You can find it on virtually all light bulbs around the world now. But all evidence points to the cartels being
Okay, guys. What really triggers me is when I'm like very clear on what I'm saying, and you purposefully derive a point that I'm not making out of a point I'm actually making. I never said that painkillers have no utility. I'm simply stating that in a lot of instances where you have some sort of physical ailment, you could absolutely cure it. You could absolutely cure the problem rather than just avoid the pain. That doesn't mean like there's nerve damage. So there's some kinds of nerve damage that you can't fucking fix with physical therapy. Like, for example, shingles, like the type of shingles that I got, is literally considered, I think, like the fucking suicide shingles or some shit, especially if you have it in your fucking head in the area that I had it, because the pain was, it seemed permanent. It was impossible to fucking deal with. There is no amount of physical therapy that you can do that will stop you from feeling pain in that area. Okay? It's just nothing you can do in that instance. Especially if you have permanent nerve damage that especially if you have a permanent nerve damage from that from the shingles, right? There's nothing you can do in that situation. It's literally just on your fucking it's on your skin. There's different ways that you can try to mitigate the pain, but ultimately you might have to take fucking some kind of opiate or something like that to dull the pain, okay? There are fucking obviously certain kinds of pain that is impossible to deal with just physical therapy. What I'm talking about is like backaches and shit like that people immediately overprescribe opiates for.
Motivated by profits and increased sales, not by what was best for consumers. So, one of the reasons this...
I love you, Hasan, but let's not act like you were being 100% clear. It sounded like you were implying most, if not all, health issues can be treated with physical therapy. Yeah, that's what I was implying. Do you have third-degree burns on your face, dude? And your nerve endings are constantly flared up? Do physical therapy.
This light bulb has lasted so long is because it was made before the cartel era. Another reason is because the filament has always been...
Oh my god, this dude said that hair transplant is not subtle. That's very nice of you to say that, to think that I have a hair transplant. That means that I have a good hairline. Thank you.
Run at low power, just 4 or 5 watts. It was meant to be a nightlight for the fire station, to provide just enough light so that firemen wouldn't run into things at night. And the fact that it was always on reduced the thermal cycling of the filament and components, limiting the stress caused by thermal expansion and contraction. The Phoebus Cartel was initially planned to last at least until 1955, but it fell apart in the 1930s. It was already struggling due to outside competition and non-compliance amongst some of its members, but the outbreak of World War II is really what finished it off. So this cartel was dead, but its methods survive to this day. There are lots of companies out there that intentionally shorten the lifespan of their products. It's a tactic known now as planned obsolescence. This was actually the subject of Casey Neistat's first viral video, all the way back in 2003.
Thank you for calling Apple. My name's Ryan. May I have your first name, please?
Casey?
All right. What seems to be the issue today?
I have an iPod that I bought about 18 months ago, and the battery is dead on it.
18 months. Okay, it's past its year, which basically means for there'll be a charge of $255 plus a mailing fee to send it to us to refurb it, to correct it. But at that price, you might as well go get a new one.
This video got millions of views in a time before YouTube or social media, and it spawned a class action lawsuit, which Apple settled out of court. But it didn't stop the company from practicing planned obsolescence. After an iOS update in 2017, users of older iPhones found apps loading significantly slower or the device shutting down altogether. Apple said they throttled performance to protect the battery of older devices and increase their longevity. Of course, that wouldn't be an issue if the batteries were replaceable. In a series of lawsuits that concluded in 2020, Apple was fined or reached settlements to pay hundreds of millions of dollars. Undoubtedly, this amount pales in comparison to the extra revenue they generate by limiting the lifespan of their products. But some would argue that planned obsolescence isn't just about greed, but that it's also good for everyone. During the Great Depression in the 1930s, when as much as a quarter of Americans were out of work, an American real estate broker, Bernard London, proposed mandatory planned obsolescence as a way to get...
It's not bullshit, but not telling your users is sketchy? No, it is literally bullshit. It is literally fucking bullshit. There is no world in which you would describe planned obsolescence as an overall good thing. There's no it's not good. It is literally bad. You are buying, oftentimes for the same, if not higher price, a shittier fucking product. Like, can you imagine doing planned obsolescence for vehicles, for example? Like, which is happening more and more frequently. I'm sure that it will ultimately start happening for vehicles as well. Super capitalism. Like, they kind of have it, but it's not to the same degree as like Apple, where you literally have it every 2 years.
People back to work and lift America out of the Depression. He wrote, "I would have the government assign a lease of life to shoes and homes and machines when they are first
You're talking about
created.
like you're
And they would
probably
be
planned
sold and
obsolescence is
used
like
within-
tire shit, like or car parts. Not in the same way that like an entire car is fucking done after 2 years or after a year when the new model
the
comes
term
out.
of their existence definitely known by the consumer. After the allotted time had expired, these things would be legally dead and would be controlled by the duly appointed governmental agency and destroyed if there is widespread unemployment." Now, this might sound like a
Apple iPhone.
wild, fringe idea, but people were clearly afraid of being put out of work by technological progress and products that were too good. There was even a popular Oscar-nominated film about it. This is The Man in the White Suit from 1951. It's about a scientist who invents the perfect fiber. It won't stain or break or fray.
I think I've succeeded in the copolymerization of amino acid residues and carbohydrate molecules, both containing ionic groups. It's really perfectly simple.
The Academy Award nomination was for Best Screenplay. I kid you not. Anyway, everyone is initially excited about our hero's scientific discovery. He makes a suit out of the thread, and it has to be white because the fiber is so stain-resistant it can't even be dyed. But this is when trouble strikes. The factory owners realize they won't be able to sell as much of this thread because it's so durable. And the workers worry it'll put them out of a job.
Why can't you scientists leave things alone? What about my bit of washing when there's no washing to do?
This is when you get the climactic scene where factory workers and factory owners team up to chase down the scientist to destroy him and his invention. And believe it or not, this movie may have been inspired by real events. In the 1940s, the synthetic fiber nylon replaced silk in stockings, and it was so durable that the products became an overnight sensation. There were literal riots when women tried to get their hands on them. When the manufacturers realized they had made the product too good, they didn't destroy the fiber, but they did follow the example of the Phoebus Cartel. They instructed their engineers and scientists to find ways to weaken the product, to shorten its lifespan so people would have to buy more. Now, it seems like consumers are finally fighting back against planned obsolescence. In the European Union and in over 25 states in the US, there's proposed legislation to enshrine the right to repair. Now, these laws would force manufacturers to make it easier to repair their products.
Like that one
They would have to
GME
provide
guy, the
information
one that
and
talked
access to
about
parts,
GME.
So you could replace a battery or fix a cracked screen at a third-party repair shop without voiding your warranty. So if the right to repair does become law, does that mean artificial obsolescence will be gone for good? Sadly, no, because there is one last thing manufacturers can use to make their products obsolete, which is you. Henry Ford released the first mass-market car, the Model T, in 1908, and he envisioned it like a workhorse, an affordable tool that wouldn't wear out, a bit like the
Henry Ford envisioned some other shit too.
everlasting light bulb.
You know what I mean?
In 1922, Ford said, "We want the man who buys one of our cars never to have to buy another. We never make an improvement that renders any previous model obsolete." But by 1920, 55% of American families already owned a car. Nearly everyone that could afford one had one. And that same year, there was a small economic downturn driving down sales for both Ford and General Motors. In 1921, DuPont, the chemical and paint company, took over the controlling share in General Motors, and they started experimenting with painting cars different colors. Up until then, Henry Ford had said, you could have whatever color you like, so long as it's black. It took a couple years of testing, but in 1924, GM released their first cars in different colors, and soon after, they introduced a trick that feels very familiar now. Each new year, they would introduce cars in different colors. The goal wasn't just to make Ford's Model T look outdated, but to make their own cars feel outdated every year, encouraging customers to trade in their old cars for shiny new ones. Years later, GM's head of design Harley Earl candidly discussed his role in creating what he called dynamic obsolescence. Our big job is to hasten obsolescence. In 1934, the average car ownership span was 5 years.
Yes, DuPont, famous for fucking poisoning everyone in America and around the world with Teflon.
Now, which was 1955, it is 2 years. When it is 1 year, we will have a perfect score. By the time he said this, General Motors was the most valuable company in the world.
Bro, yes, they unlocked skins, dude. They just basically, they recognize, oh shit, DLCs and skins, baby.
And it sold half of all vehicles purchased in the US every year. These days, the world's most valuable company, Apple, seems to have copied directly out of this playbook. I mean, new styles every year? Check. New special colors every year? Check. Marginal technological improvement? Check. I mean, is this useful innovation or just a gimmick? The inspiration for General Motors, and hence for Apple, comes from fashion, where real innovation is all but impossible. So the only way to make people feel the urgency to get out there and buy is to create styles that last but one season. The trouble then is you run through these styles too quickly, and then what are you supposed to do? Well, just
fucking Femboy Friday, baby. That's what it is. Before you know it, it's Femboy Friday, and you're dressing like a 6-year-old, and everyone in the chat is upset at you for saying that it is not for you. Okay?
recycle the styles from a few decades ago. The iPhone also shows this recycling trend. I mean, just look at the way the edges were initially rounded, and then they were squared off. And then they were rounded again, and now they're squared off. And how much do you want to bet that the iPhone 14 has rounded edges?
Wait, I'm confused because they all look fucking squared off. Every single one of them was pretty squared off.
I think the point is that with design and styling, there is no best. There's only different, which is apparently enough to remind us that we don't have the latest and greatest.
Shit on half your community on Community Day? Really? Dude, you're gonna get butthurt?
And so we have to rush out.
Half my community dresses up as 6-year-old femboys? Is that what it is?
Keep buying. The
Not
only
the
type
corners?
of obsolescence we should support is technological, which brings us back to the
Oh,
light
he's talking about this screen.
You know, in the last 20 years, light bulbs have gone from incandescent, which was basically unchanged for 100 years, to compact fluorescent, and now to LED. These use just 1/10 the energy and can last anywhere from 10 to 50 times longer. Yeah, that's pretty bright. So you're more likely to sell your house than to have to replace an LED bulb that you've installed inside it. So we've finally reached the point of what is essentially an everlasting light bulb.
Only took like, 100 years. Repair tech here, the edges are rounded on 6 to 11. The sides are flat on the 4, 5, and 12 models. Farmers are hacking their tractors because of a repair ban. All right, let's do it. Let's do fucking let's do PO Box.